She thought it would be just another flight, a routine trip, nothing special, nothing memorable. But the moment she stepped onto the plane, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, quieter somehow, like the space was holding a secret she wasn't ready for. Then she heard it, a calm, steady voice greeting passengers at the entrance. "Welcome aboard, Mom." Simple words, polite, professional. But the second she looked up, everything inside her stopped. It was him. For a brief second, she couldn't move. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. Standing there in full uniform, composed and confident, was her husband. Same man she had argued with just weeks ago. The same man she believed was drifting away from her. And now here he was, the pilot of this flight. She forced herself to keep walking, her steps slower than before. Her heart raced, but her face stayed still, controlled. She didn't say anything to him, and he didn't break his professional posture. Just a brief glance, a moment that felt longer than it should. Then it was gone. She moved down the aisle, but her thoughts stayed behind, stuck at the front of that plane. As she reached her seat, her hands tightened around her bag. This didn't make sense. He had never told her he would be here. In fact, he hadn't told her much of anything lately. Their conversations had become short, almost distant. She had started to believe he was pulling away, choosing work over everything else. And now, seeing him like that, focused, respected, in control, it challenged everything. He tore soul. Control. It challenged everything. She sat down, but couldn't relax. Around her, passengers were settling in, chatting, placing bags in overhead bins. Everything felt normal to everyone else. But for her, the world had shifted. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the uniform, the confidence, the way he carried himself. It wasn't new, but she had never truly seen it before. Then came the announcement. His voice filled the cabin, calm and steady, introducing the flight, explaining the route, reassuring passengers. It was professional, practiced, but there was something deeper beneath it, something she hadn't noticed before. Dedication, a quiet pride that didn't need attention. She listened closely, every word hitting differently now. Memories started surfacing. Late nights when he came home exhausted, days when he barely spoke, not because he didn't care, but because he was carrying more than she understood. Instead of asking, instead of trying to see his world, she had questioned him, doubted him, sometimes even dismissed his efforts as "she sprus tusen war to force or form." Now, sitting just a few rows behind the cockpit, she felt that weight clearly. Not his, but her own. The realization that she hadn't been paying attention, that while he was building something meaningful, she was focused on what she thought was missing. The plane began to move, slowly taxiing toward the runway. She looked forward again, her eyes fixed on the closed cockpit door. It felt different now. Not just a door, but a boundary between what she thought she knew and what she was only beginning to understand. And as the engines roared to life, one thing became clear. This flight wasn't going to be ordinary at all. The plane lifted off the runway. Her chest felt tight, like something unspoken had finally caught up with her. The city below shrank into the distance, but her thoughts only grew louder. Leaned back in her seat, eyes fixed ahead, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. That moment at the door kept replaying. His calm expression, the way he didn't react, didn't break focus. It wasn't cold, it was controlled, professional, and somehow, that made it hit even harder. He remembered the last real conversation they had. It hadn't ended well. She had questioned his long absences, the constant training, the unpredictable schedule. She had asked if it was all worth it, if all that effort was leading anywhere. At the time, her words felt justified. Now they echoed differently. Now they felt heavy. A flight attendant moved down the aisle, offering drinks and checking on passengers. When she reached her, she smiled politely and asked if everything was okay. She nodded, forcing a small smile in return. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. But inside, something was shifting in a way she couldn't ignore. Another announcement came from the cockpit. His voice again, court clear, steady, explaining a minor change in altitude due to weather ahead. Passengers barely reacted, trusting the voice without question. He listened closely, noticing the precision in his tone, the quiet authority in every word. This wasn't just a job, this was responsibility. Lives in his hands, decisions made in seconds. Pressure she had never truly imagined. She looked around at the other passengers. Some were relaxed, some asleep, others watching movies. None of them knew him personally. None of them knew the late nights, the sacrifices, the effort behind that calm voice. To them, he was just the pilot. But to her, he was more, or at least, he was supposed to be. And yet, sitting there, she realized how little she had truly seen. Her thoughts drifted further back, to the early days, when everything felt easier, when they talked more, laughed more, supported each other without hesitation. Somewhere along the way, things changed. Suddenly, but slowly. Small misunderstandings turned into distance. Silence replaced conversations. And instead of trying to understand, she had filled in the gaps with assumptions. Off chime interrupted her thoughts as the seatbelt sign turned off. People began moving around, stretching, continuing their routines. Stayed still. Something inside her wasn't ready to move on just yet. Needed to sit with this feeling, no matter how uncomfortable it was. It's later, a flight attendant approached her again, this time with a quieter tone. She leaned slightly closer and said, "The captain asked if you're doing okay." Just one sentence. Simple, professional, but it landed deeply. Her breath caught for a second. Out of all the responsibilities he had at that moment, he still found a way to check on her. Not directly, not in a way that crossed any boundaries, but enough to show that he hadn't forgotten. He still cared. She nodded again, more genuinely this time. "I'm fine," she replied softly. But the truth was, she wasn't. She was realizing something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. While she had been focused on what she felt was missing, he had been quietly showing up in ways she never acknowledged. Ways that didn't demand attention, but deserved it. And now, thousands of feet above the ground, there was no distraction left. Her thoughts, and a truth that was becoming impossible to ignore. Time moved differently in the air. Minutes stretched longer. Thoughts felt louder, and there was nowhere to hide from them. She sat by the window, watching clouds drift endlessly, but her focus stayed inside. Everything felt clearer now, almost uncomfortably so. The distance between her and the cockpit wasn't far in steps, but it felt like a space filled with everything left unsaid between them. Tried to distract herself, adjusting her seat, looking around, even glancing at her phone, but nothing held her attention. Her mind kept returning to him, to the way he carried himself, to the quiet strength in his voice. And slowly, something she hadn't expected began to rise. Not just guilt, but admiration. The kind that comes when you finally see someone for who they truly are. Light shake of the plane pulled her back to the moment. It wasn't strong, just enough to make a few passengers pause. The seatbelt sign lit up again, and a calm announcement followed. His voice, steady as ever, explaining the turbulence, reassuring everyone that everything was under control. There was no hesitation, no fear in his tone, just quiet confidence. She looked around. Some passengers held onto their armrests, others looked slightly nervous. But no one panicked. They trusted him. Without knowing his story, without seeing his struggles, they believed in his ability to guide them safely. Trust was automatic, natural, and for the first time, she realized she hadn't given him that same trust. Her grip on the armrest tightened slightly, not because of the movement of the plane, but because of that realization. How many times had she doubted him, questioned his choices, treated his silence like distance instead of understanding it as pressure he couldn't always explain? The turbulence passed quickly, and the cabin settled again. But something inside her didn't settle, it shifted further. A memory came back, clear and sharp. One night, he had come home later than usual, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open. He had asked him why he kept pushing himself so hard, why he didn't choose something easier. He had looked at her, not angry, not defensive, just quiet. "Because it matters," he had said. At the time, she didn't fully understand what he meant. Now, sitting here, she finally did. It mattered because people relied on him. Because every decision he made carried weight. Because he had chosen a path that required more than just effort. It required discipline, focus, and sacrifice. Things she had seen, but never truly recognized. Another small moment followed. A child a few rows ahead asked their parent if everything was okay after the turbulence. The parent smiled and said, "The pilot knows what he's doing." Simple words, but they echoed deeply. She looked forward again, her eyes resting on the closed cockpit door. The first time she didn't see distance, she saw responsibility, strength, version of him that had always been there, but one she had overlooked. It was clarity. She wasn't just watching a flight anymore. She was witnessing the reality of a man she thought she knew, and realizing she had only seen a small part of him. The rest of the flight felt quieter, not because the cabin had changed, but because her thoughts had finally settled into something clear. The noise in her mind had been replaced with understanding. Not perfect, not complete, but enough to see things different. She sat still, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the front. But now there was no confusion in her expression, only reflection. Another announcement came, this time about the upcoming descent. His voice remained steady, measured, guiding everyone through what would happen next. It was the same tone he had used all along, but now it carried meaning she hadn't noticed before. Every word was intentional, every pause controlled. It wasn't just information. It was reassurance. Leaned back slightly, taking a slow breath. First time since boarding, she allowed herself to feel something beyond the weight of realization. Pride. Quiet, but real. Not loud or overwhelming, but enough to shift the way she saw him. The man she had questioned, the one she thought was pulling away, was actually standing strong in a place she hadn't taken the time to understand. The plane began its descent. The cabin adjusted. Passengers straightened in their seats. Conversations softened. Attention returned to the moment. Outside the window, the clouds parted, revealing the ground slowly coming back into view. Everything felt steady, controlled. Just like his voice, a small detail caught her attention. The way the crew moved with confidence, following a routine that depended on trust in each other. trust in the one leading them, and at the center of it all was him. She thought about everything again, but this time without confusion. The late nights, the silence, the distance she had felt. It all looked different now, not as neglect but as effort placed somewhere she hadn't fully seen, somewhere that demanded more from him than she had realized. The wheels touched the ground smoothly, almost effortlessly. Quiet moment passed, then the sound of movement as the plane slowed down. Round her, passengers relaxed, some already reaching for their bags, others checking their phones. To them it was just another landing, safe routine, but for her it meant more. It was proof of everything he had been working toward. Everything she had questioned without understanding. He hadn't just been doing a job. He had been carrying responsibility, making decisions, ensuring that every person on board arrived safely, including her. The plane came to a complete stop, and a final announcement followed. His voice again, thanking passengers, wishing them well. Professional, composed, just like before. But now she heard something deeper beneath it, a quiet confidence that didn't need recognition. People began to stand, reaching for their belongings, preparing to leave. The usual rush filled the aisle. She didn't move, not yet. She stayed seated, her hands resting still, her eyes forward. Because this time, she wasn't just another passenger getting off a flight. She was someone who had finally seen the truth, and knew she couldn't walk away the same way she came in. The aisle slowly cleared as passengers made their way out, one by one, carrying on with their day as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To them, it was just another flight, another safe arrival. But she remained seated, her hands still, her thoughts steady in a way they hadn't been before. For the first time in a long while, she knew exactly what she needed to do. When the cabin had nearly emptied, she finally stood up. Her steps were slower now, not from hesitation, but from intention. Every step forward felt meaningful. As she moved closer to the front, her heart began to beat a little faster. But this time it wasn't from shock or confusion. It was from clarity. The cockpit door was open now. He stood just outside, speaking briefly with a crew member, still in uniform, still carrying that same calm presence. When he turned and saw her, there was a brief pause, not awkward, not distant, just a moment where everything unspoken finally had space to exist. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she stepped closer. "I didn't know," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried everything she had been holding back. It wasn't just about the flight. It was about everything. The distance, the doubts, the moments she hadn't understood. He looked at her, his expression steady but softer now. "I know," he replied. No anger. "Saxify say, secure sextration?" "Just on stay." Response hid deeper than she took a small breath, gathering the words she should have said a long time ago. "I thought you were pulling away," she admitted. "I didn't see what you were building. I didn't take the time to understand." He didn't interrupt. He just listened, and today I saw it, she continued, her voice more certain now. "Not just what you do, but who you are in it. The responsibility, the focus, the way people trust you without even knowing you. I should have trusted you like that too." There was a quiet moment between them, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt real. He nodded slightly, taking in her words. "It wasn't easy," he said, not as a complaint but as truth. "There were things I couldn't always explain, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how." I understood that now. "I get it," she said softly, "and I'm sorry I didn't try harder to see it before." For the first time, a small, genuine smile appeared on his face. Not big, not dramatic. Use proper for jam or worse. Just enough to show that something had shifted there for a moment longer. The distance between them no longer filled with assumptions, but with understanding. It wasn't a perfect ending. Nothing suddenly fixed everything, but it was a start, a real one. As they walked out of the plane together, side by side, there was no need for more words. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer empty. It was steady. Because sometimes, it only takes one moment, one truth, to change the way you see everything. And for them, that moment had finally arrived.